It started on an evening when the light didn't behave the way it should. The sun had already set, the sky bled from orange to a deep, bruised purple, but her shadow stayed stretched across the floor like it refused to fade into the night. Her name was Mara Linton, a woman who lived alone on the second floor of an old boarding house, a place where mirrors seemed too tilted just slightly forward, as if leaning in to get a better look at you. And the sound of footsteps in the hallway never quite matched her own. That night was different. When she reached for the chain on her old floor lamp and clicked it off, the room plunged into darkness. But the shadow, it didn't disappear. It stayed, a stark, human-shaped void against the wall. And then it moved. Just a slight tilt of the head, a gesture she hadn't made. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, pricked at her skin. Her voice was a dry whisper in the sudden stillness of the room. "Who are you?" And from the darkness on the wall, a sound like rustling leaves, a whisper just as faint as her own, answered back. Mara was 42 years old, a librarian in the small, perpetually misty coastal town of Briar's End. Her life was a study in quiet routine, a predictable and comforting rhythm. Morning coffee at precisely 7:10 a.m. The walk to the library through streets so thick with fog, you could almost taste the salt on your tongue. And her evenings, always, were spent in the warm yellow glow of that same lamp, lost in the pages of a book. She'd always found a strange comfort in the stillness of things, the way light carved out the passage of time, and the way shadows filled the empty spaces in between. They were silent companions. But recently, something had felt off. Her own reflection in the shop windows she passed seemed delayed, lagging a fraction of a second behind her movements. When she waved, it hesitated. When she smiled, it seemed to breathe first, its expression forming a moment too late. She'd dismissed it as tricks of the light, the fatigue of long days. Then came the night she stayed late at the library, sorting a mountain of returned books. The building was empty, the silence so profound it seemed to have a weight of its own. As she finished, she reached up to turn off the desk lamp, her hand hovering over the switch. That's when she saw it. On the wall behind her, her shadow, her own dark silhouette, leaned forward, as if trying to peer over her shoulder, but she hadn't moved. She was frozen, her hand still in the air, her heart hammered against her ribs. And from that dark shape on the wall, a whisper, faint as breath but clear as a bell, slithered into the silence. "You forgot something." Over the next week, her relationship with her shadow transformed. It was no longer a simple mimic. It began to act with a will of its own. It would lag behind as she turned corners, its dark form lingering in the hallway for a moment before catching up. It would pause on the stairs when she didn't, a silent, watchful presence just at the edge of her vision. And then it began to speak more frequently. When she was alone, thinking aloud, she would hear responses always quiet, always unnervingly patient. One evening, staring at the dark shape on the wall, she finally asked the question that had been haunting her. "What are you?" she murmured, the words feeling foolish and insane. The whisper came back instantly, a dry rustle from the wall. What's left? At first, she tried to convince herself she was losing her mind, that the stress and the loneliness were finally cracking her sanity. So she started to document it, a desperate attempt to ground herself in facts. She bought a small leather-bound notebook and began writing down every single interaction, the time, the date, the exact phrase she heard. By the third night, the notebook was nearly full. Her handwriting grew more frantic with each entry. But as she reviewed the pages, she saw something that made her blood run cold. At the bottom of each page, in a spidery, unfamiliar script that was most definitely not her own, was a single repeated line. "Don't leave the light on tonight." That very evening, as if summoned by the words in the notebook, a storm rolled in from the sea. The wind howled, rattling the old windows of the boarding house. And then, with a sudden flicker, the power went out across all of Briar's End. The world went black, silent, save for the storm. But her room wasn't completely dark. The pale, milky light of the full moon filtered through her window, casting a silver rectangle on the floor. And there, standing on the wall, fully formed and independent of any light source she could see, was her shadow. It moved, detaching from the wall and stepping toward her, its form coalescing into something more solid, more present. "You used to listen," it whispered, its voice stronger now, more defined. Mara backed away, her breath catching in her throat. "To what?" she stammered. The shadow tilted its head, a gesture that was achingly familiar. "To me," it said, "I'm everything you buried when you stopped believing you were real." And in that terrifying, impossible moment, the lights flickered back on. The room was flooded with the warm yellow glow of her lamp, and the wall was empty. The shadow was gone. The encounter left Mara reeling, haunted by the shadow's words. Everything you buried. What had she buried? She needed answers. The next day, she went to the town's historical archive, a dusty, forgotten corner of the library she'd worked in for years. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she felt an undeniable pull, a certainty that an answer was hidden somewhere in the town's past. She started pulling old records of the boarding house, sifting through brittle newspaper clippings and faded photographs. In a box labeled Residence, 1953, her fingers brushed against a worn black and white photograph. Her heart stopped. It was her room, her apartment, the same window, the same aged floorboards, and even the same floor lamp standing in the corner. And standing by the window, in the exact spot where she always read at night, was a woman. The woman was her. Underneath the photo, a typed label read, "Mara Linton Tennant, room to be." But the date was wrong. It was impossible. 1953, decades before she was even born. She shouldn't have been there. That night, back in her room, the air felt thick with anticipation. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was waiting. She looked at the wall where the shadow had stood, and she asked one last question into the darkness. How long have you been here?" The answer came softly, filled with a strange, ancient sadness. "Since the first time you turned off the light," and as the words echoed in the room, the shadow on the wall began to move again. It glided closer, its edges blurring, until it overlapped her own body completely, merging with hers. In that instant of cold, dark fusion, a lifetime of forgotten memories crashed over her. The screech of tires, the shattering of glass, the blinding, sterile white of a hospital room, and a whisper, a promise she had made to someone or something as she lay watching the light fade through the window. A promise to go back. She understood now. She had never left that room, the crash. It had been real, and she had been living here, in this apartment, inside a memory of light, for nearly 70 years. The next morning, the landlord used his master key to check on the quiet tenant in room 2B. He found the apartment empty. There was no suitcase missing, no clothes gone, no sign of a planned departure at all. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. The only thing left behind was a small notebook lying open on the table. On the final page, written in an uneven, shaky handwriting, were the last words Mara Linton ever wrote. "It's quieter on this side." When the police came to investigate, they took photographs of the room for their report. It was only later, when developing the film, that one of the officers noticed something strange. In the photo of the window, there was a faint, almost transparent outline of a woman standing just behind the curtain, in a spot where the bright light from outside should have fallen, casting a shadow. But there was no shadow, there was only her. Now, years later, every new tenant who moves into room 2B mentions the same strange detail. They say that at night, when you turn off the lamp, the room goes dark, but not completely. There's always one shadow left on the wall that doesn't disappear. Sometimes the light remembers what our minds try to forget. And sometimes the shadows remember who we were long before we turned away from ourselves. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next descent into the shadows.